Here now with a comparison review of the Doug Ritter Mini-Griptilian RSK Mini Mark 1. That's 558 by Benchmade's numbering system. And the original Mel Pardue design Mini-Griptilian, the 556 I believe it is. And I've already done a review individually of the Doug Ritter Griptilian. You can take a look at that. And I mentioned that I would be doing a review comparing these two knives, these two very similar knives. And so here's that review. So basically what this is the original Griptilian here, designed by Mel Pardue, and then Doug Ritter got together with Mel back apparently around 1999 and started discussing some idea for a knife that he had. And Doug Ritter does a lot of survival equipment and practical survival technique reviews and discussions, and wanted to make a knife that he could use or could market as a survival knife with secondary purpose as an EDC knife. So finally around 2004 they came up with a design, and this Doug Ritter model is the result of it. So they are very similar knives. I'll put up some stats of them over here. They're roughly the same size, roughly the same weight. Blades are roughly the same size. And go ahead, just open them up here for you. Give you a little preview look of them. So as you can see, they're very similar designed. They both have similar roles, similar purposes. The Ritter model was designed initially as a survival type knife, and I might argue that it's probably a little better survival knife than the original one, than the original Griptilian. This has a bit more robust blade, a bit thicker, and I think that would be a little bit better for survival type cutting. It's going to be a little bit stronger compared to the narrower design of the original Griptilian blade. But I think they would probably both serve you well in either situation. The Ritter one might go a little bit more under the radar, as I mentioned in the review of that, if you're using it as an everyday carry knife, because of the stone-washed finish on the blade. It's a little less conspicuous. Not that the blade on the original one is a big shiny blade, but it's a little bit more so as compared to the stone-washed blade. So if you're in places where people are antsy and nervous that you have a knife, you get out the Ritter one, and it might not be quite as conspicuous looking for what that's worth. They do both come in some different colors. Put the colors up here. The Ritter comes in black, yellow, and pink, and the original one comes in a bunch of colors. I think blue, yellow. I'll post them over here so you can see. The Ritter model only comes in a plain edge, whereas the original one comes in both the plain edge and the combo edge. Now the handle materials on these are slightly different. The Ritter model is a glass-filled Noril GTX, whereas the original one is a Velox thermoplastic PBT. PBT is polyethylene terephthalate, which is just a long chemical name for, you know, this resin that they use. And feeling these two handles, they are both, I mean, you for the most part can't tell a difference. The Ritter model maybe feels just slightly more grippy. Really though, it's very negligible. You're not going to have an issue with either one. I mean, putting them in my hand, there's just the most imperceptible bit of difference. But for practical, all intents and purposes, not going to be really any difference at all between the two of them with what you're going to notice, I don't think. The Velox apparently has a little bit lower structural rigidity, and one of the ways they compensate for that in both knives is that they have the steel liners on the inside here, and they are not milled out. See if we can focus on that a little bit. Get this one out of the way. The liners are not milled out like they are in some of the other knives to save weight. They're the same on both knives. But both of these knives are very light anyway. They weigh in at about, I think, 2.56 and 2.68 ounces. So that's not really an issue. The handles otherwise, they're both similar design as far as all the stuff on them goes. They both have the lanyard hole back here. They both have the pocket clip, which is reversible. The pocket clip, however, on the original Benchmade is a nicer pocket clip. The one on the Doug Ritter one is going to show a lot more wear. It has this very matte finish, and although this knife is essentially a brand new knife, it's already showing a fair amount of wear compared to the original Benchmade one. Let's see if I can zoom in on that a little bit for you. See if you can get a bit of an idea comparing the two. Maybe even a little bit more. So I don't know if you can see the original one here, has a little bit of a sort of hint of a shiny finish to it. There you go. And it's going to show somewhere, but not nearly as much as this Doug Ritter design one. And as I mentioned in the review of the Doug Ritter knife, I don't really mind that for the purposes that I'm using this knife for. As an everyday carry knife, it's going to show some wear, and really not a big issue in the end as far as that goes. But I do prefer the pocket clip on the original Griptilian. Moving on down, they have the axis lock here. On the other side, they both have the Torx screws. So same design there. Now, the jimping, zoom back out a little bit. The jimping on these knives is very nice. I commented on it in the original review of the Ritter model, and I'm borrowing my friend's Mini-Griptilian here, so I didn't have this one for comparison when I made the original video here. And I thought maybe the jimping on this was basically only on this Ritter model, but was unique to it. But actually the jimping on the handles themselves are pretty much the same. So it's wonderful jimping on the handles. See if I can zoom in a little bit on that for you. So you can see the jimping there. It's actually enough that you can get a decent grip on it, so it's pretty nice. Like I said, it's pretty much the same on both knives. Now, where the jimping differs is when you get down into the blade, and the jimping on the Ritter one on the blade is much nicer. It's much more grippy to the point where I could almost cut myself with it, I think, if I grabbed it hard enough. But you can see it has a much sharper design, kind of angles back a little bit, and it's longer, whereas the jimping on the Mel Pardue version is shorter and not quite as nice, not quite as grippy. So you're going to get a lot more traction on this one as compared to the original one. One of the other things I say that you can use the jimping for on the blade on the Doug Ritter one is if you need to start a fire. Again, going back to the fact that it's supposed to be a survival knife. If you need to start a fire and you had some flint that you could strike this with, although you should do it with the knife closed to make it a little bit safer. The blades on the two are a little bit different. On the material itself, the Ritter model has the nicer S30V steel, whereas the original Griptilian has a 154 cm. The S30V is going to hold an edge a little bit longer, although it's a hint tougher to sharpen because of that. They have the different blade profile. They're both a drop point, but the Doug Ritter model has this high flat grind, whereas the original Griptilian is not quite as much. The Ritter model is a little bit beefier all the way out to the tip, which I think is going to make it a little bit stronger, especially again if you're in a survival type situation. It's probably going to make it a little bit stronger for cutting bigger things like that compared to the narrower design of this. But again, for everyday use, it's probably not going to be a big deal. You can see the logo there, Benchmade logo on the original Mini-Griptilian, the Doug Ritter logo on the Ritter model. And then looking at the back, Mel Pardue design, and the 154 cm on the original Mini-Griptilian, and then the Benchmade logo is on the back of the Doug Ritter model. Overall, the ergonomics of both of them, pretty much the same. You can get your hand pretty much the same amount onto both of them. At least, the grips are the same size. The only thing that's really going to differ in the ergonomics is, I suppose, the jimping on the Ritter model. Up here on the blade is a little bit nicer. And, cutting it, I don't have a lot of practical use in this yet. But this blade is a little bit stronger. Whether you're going to be able to tell a difference with that and cutting, I don't know. Maybe if you're out cutting some bigger stuff, perhaps. But for everyday stuff, probably not going to be a big deal. But otherwise, the ergonomics of both knives is pretty much the same, I think. Not going to be an issue there in either direction. Durability of both knives. The handles, I think, are going to be a toss-up. You know, they are slightly different materials, but feeling them, they both feel roughly identical, and I don't think you're going to have a problem with wear on either of the handles. The blade, the S30V, in theory, is going to hold up a little bit longer than that 154 cm, so it's going to be a little bit tougher blade steel there. But otherwise, I think these are both great knives that are going to hold up for a long time. Value of both of these, the price on them, the Ritter model goes for $112 is the retail price, and it's actually selling for that. The original Mini-Griptilian retail price is $95. It's selling a little bit less than that depending on what websites you find it on. Portion of the proceeds from the Ritter model do go to support the nonprofit Equipped to Survive Foundation, and the pink version of this goes to support breast cancer. So a little bit, you pay a little bit of a premium for the Ritter model. Some of the money goes to some good causes for what that's worth. So overall, there you have it for these knives. They're both very similar knives. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. You know, it depends a little bit on maybe what you're using it for. If you're looking for a little bit more of a pure survival knife, maybe you could give the nod to this one. If you like the finish or the style of the blade on one of the two, or you're looking for a little premium blade steel and you want to get that S30V, that might be where there's a little bit of price difference between the two. So it really just comes down to what you're looking for, what kind of blade you like, what kind of design you like. But they're both great knives. I don't think you'd go wrong with either one of them. So I do have a custom made model of this Mini-Griptilian coming in. Should be here a couple days. I'll try and get a review of that done as well. So keep an eye out for that one. And thanks for watching again.